There's a moment many people experience, but rarely talk about. It usually happens quietly. You pick up your phone without thinking much of it. Maybe you're in between tasks. Maybe it's the end of the day. You open your messages, scroll for a second, then pause. No new notifications, no missed calls, no one asking how you're doing. Just silence. At first, it doesn't seem like a big deal. You tell yourself people are busy. Life gets in the way. But then your mind starts to linger on the thought a little longer than usual. When was the last time someone checked on you first? Not because they needed something, not because you reached out first, but simply because they thought of you. And if that moment feels unfamiliar, a quiet question may begin to form in the background. Why does it feel like no one checks on me? It's not always something you say out loud. In fact, most people don't, but the feeling is real. And over time, if it repeats often enough, it can start to feel like a reflection of your place in other people's lives, as if being checked on is somehow connected to being remembered or valued. But what if that assumption isn't telling the full story? What if the reason is not as personal as it feels? Imagine someone who has always been steady, the kind of person who keeps things together, the one who responds when others reach out, the one who listens, supports, and shows up without hesitation. Their days are filled with responsibilities, routines, and small interactions. They communicate when needed, they maintain relationships, and they keep moving forward. From the outside, nothing seems out of place. People see them as reliable, consistent, independent. So naturally, others assume they're doing fine. Weeks pass, conversations happen, messages are exchanged, but most of them revolve around other people's lives, other people's needs, other people's moments. And slowly, something subtle begins to form, not through a single event, but through repetition. This person notices that they are often the one initiating contact. They are the one checking in. They are the one asking questions. And when they stop doing that, the conversations become rare, not non-existent, just quieter. One evening, after a long day, they sit with their phone in hand. They scroll through old messages, messages where they offered support, messages where they were present for others. And then they compare it to the present moment. Silence, no new check-ins, no unexpected messages, no one asking how they're feeling. And that's when the thought begins to surface. If I don't reach out, no one really does. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's just there. And the longer it stays, the more it starts to shape how they see themselves in relation to others. They begin to expect less. They hesitate more before reaching out, not because they don't care, but because something in them starts to question whether it matters. And beneath all of that, a quiet emotional pattern starts to build, a sense of being overlooked, not intentionally, but consistently. From a psychological perspective, this experience is more common and more explainable than it first appears. Human attention is limited. People are constantly managing their own responsibilities, thoughts, stress, and routines. Even when they care about others, their mental focus is often centered on what is immediately in front of them. This means that connection is not just about feelings. It's also about visibility. We tend to respond to what we can see. When someone expresses need clearly through words, tone, or behavior, it naturally draws attention. The brain registers it as something requiring a response. But when someone appears stable, self-sufficient, and composed, the brain makes an assumption. They're probably okay. This isn't a conscious decision most of the time. It's a pattern recognition process. Over time, if a person consistently presents themselves as fine, capable, and independent, others begin to internalize that image, not as a judgment, but as an expectation, and expectations shape behavior. If someone has never seen you struggle, they are less likely to imagine that you might need support, not because they don't care, but because their mental model of you doesn't include that scenario. There's also the role dynamic that forms in relationships. In many social connections, people unconsciously fall into patterns. One person becomes the listener, another becomes the sharer. One becomes the supporter, another becomes the one being supported. These roles, once established, tend to persist. So, if you are often the one who listens, advises, or checks on others, people may come to associate you with that role, and without realizing it, they may stop thinking of you as someone who needs the same kind of attention in return. Another factor is communication itself. Many people assume that if something is wrong, it will be communicated. They rely on signals, explicit or implicit, to guide their responses. If those signals are absent, they assume stability. Not indifference, not rejection, just absence of indication. All of this creates a quiet mismatch. On one side, you may be feeling unseen or unconsidered. On the other side, others may genuinely believe everything is fine. And because neither side is fully aware of the other's perspective, the gap remains unspoken. The absence of check-ins does not define your value. It reflects a combination of patterns, perceptions, and behaviors that have developed over time. If you've been the strong one, people will treat you as strong. If you've been the consistent one, people will expect consistency. If you've been the one who rarely expresses struggle, people will assume there isn't much struggle to see. None of this makes you less important, but it does highlight something essential about human connection. Connection is not only about how others treat you, it's also shaped by how you are perceived and how you allow yourself to be known. This doesn't mean you need to become someone else. It doesn't mean you have to share everything or change your personality. It simply means that if you want to be checked on, there needs to be something visible for others to respond to. Even small expressions can shift how people relate to you. A simple acknowledgement that things have been heavy lately. A moment of honesty that breaks the assumption of constant stability. A willingness to let others see that you are human, not just dependable. Because when people see that side, it adjusts their perception. And when perception changes, behavior often follows. At the same time, it's important to recognize that not everyone will naturally be inclined to check in first. Some people express care differently. Some people are not as proactive in initiating emotional connection. That doesn't automatically mean they don't care, but it does mean that the kind of support you're hoping for may not come from every relationship in the same way. Which is why it becomes important to notice balance. Relationships that feel mutual tend to have a natural flow of effort in both directions, not perfectly equal at all times, but shared in a way that doesn't leave one person consistently carrying the emotional weight. And sometimes, finding that balance means gradually investing more in connections where the effort feels reciprocated. If you've been feeling like no one checks on you, it's easy for the mind to turn that into a personal conclusion, that you are overlooked, that you are not thought of, that you don't matter as much as others. But reality is often more nuanced than that. Sometimes, you have been seen, just in a specific way, as strong, as steady, as someone who manages on their own. And that image, while positive on the surface, can unintentionally lead others to assume you don't need the same kind of care you give to them. Your experience is still valid, that quiet feeling of wanting to be checked on, of wanting someone to think of you without being prompted. That comes from a very human place, a place that values connection, recognition, and mutual care. And even if it hasn't shown up as often as you'd like, it doesn't mean it won't. There are people who notice. There are people who care, and there are people who will, over time, Naturally check in without being asked. But in the meantime, it may help to gently allow yourself to be more visible in your own way, not to force attention, not to demand it, just to create space for connection to happen more naturally. Because sometimes, being seen begins with letting a small part of you be known, and from there, relationships can begin to shift, slowly, quietly, but meaningfully, and in that shift, you may find that the silence you once noticed is no longer the same as before.